and welcome back to another video on my channel. We are back in my house. I'm so happy. Something happened and my mom decided not to move, so that is fantastic. I don't know where majority of my stuff is, so obviously this is not my normal picture that I have behind me, and some of my stuff is here but not all of it, but that doesn't really matter because I'm just so happy to be home. This is the first video that I'm filming since I broke my laptop, and I know that some of you know that I broke my laptop because I did write a little thing on the community board, but like it was the craziest thing ever. I was watching Netflix on my laptop, and then I got up, closed my laptop, put it on my desk, woke up the next day, opened my laptop to do something on it, which would probably have been edit a YouTube video because I had filmed and I was like all ready to go, but I just didn't have it edited. And this is what my laptop looked like. It looks like something squished it, but I don't really know what happened. But I ended up buying a new one. I'm gonna try and get that one fixed, but I just didn't have time. Things have been chaotic with the moving all over the place and whatever, so I was like, you know what, I'll just buy one and then I'll have a backup one once this one gets fixed, if it gets fixed. But anyways, with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. I'm so happy to be back here and I'm so happy to be filming, and then I can edit on my laptop and everything just seems to be falling into place, so that's great. So with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. The case that we are going to be discussing today is one that I think a lot of you are going to find to be very, very interesting. It is an extremely old case, being over 100 years old, but the entire thing is honestly I don't want to say funny because like it is tragic, but the entire thing just is kind of odd, and I think it will really interest you guys because it started as a paranormal haunting case that turned into a true crime case. So obviously that is not something that happens very often, and it is a very, very interesting one. Today we are going to be discussing the case of the Hammersmith Ghost. Now this took place in Hammersmith, England in 1803. Now at that time, the homes that were in that area were fairly new. As far as I could find during my research, it seemed that these homes were just built, and you would think that would be a good thing because usually you don't hear too much about hauntings going on in new homes. However, in this case, that was not the case, as several of the residents started to report that they were having an issue with a ghost. Once nightfall would hit, that is when the residents of Hammersmith started to report that they were having issues with a ghost that was white from head to toe. It started circulating around the community that people were being stalked by this ghost, and that is when people started to come to the conclusion that this was the ghost of a man who had killed himself earlier that year and had been buried in the churchyard. Now at this time in 1803, people thought that if you committed suicide, you should not be buried on church property because they think that that would mean that you would not rest. Now obviously this is BS, but back in the day, people believed a lot of very, very questionable things, so they thought that because this man who committed suicide was buried on church property, he could not rest, and that is why he was haunting Hammersmith. At first you would think, or well, I would think that people were being scared of the sighting of this ghost, because I think if I saw a ghost, I would be traumatized. So you'd think that's why people were being scared. However, there was more to this. People were going out late at night and being physically attacked by this entity. They were being harassed, and if you went out late at night once darkness hit in Hammersmith, you were putting yourself at risk to be harassed and attacked by this ghost. In one of these instances where people had claimed to have seen the Hammersmith Ghost, there was this man, and he was driving or steering, I don't know how you would say that, an 8-horse carriage with like a bunch of passengers. And while he was traveling with these horses and these passengers, he claimed that he had seen the Hammersmith Ghost, and he got so freaked out that he jumped off of the carriage, abandoning all of the passengers and the horses, and just took off because he was so scared of the sighting of this ghost. There were two other instances where two women who were not together, these are two completely separate encounters. One of these women was an elderly woman, and one of these women were a pregnant woman. And they had been walking past the churchyard when they had allegedly seen this ghost, and they were so scared by the sight of this ghost that they died. Like, they literally died from being so scared. Like, the fright of seeing this ghost killed them. And honestly, this ghost must have been pretty terrifying looking to be so scared that you end up passing away. Like, I can't imagine being that scared of anything. A man by the name of Thomas Groom also claimed that he had an encounter with the Hammersmith Ghost. He said that it was late one evening and he was with his companion and they were walking through the churchyard, or I guess like the graveyard, which seems to be a weird place to take a stroll in the middle of the night or late at night. But anyway, they were walking through this churchyard and he had his hands in his pocket and he had a jacket tucked tightly underneath his arm. So while Thomas was walking through this graveyard, allegedly somebody had popped out from behind one of the tombstones and grabbed Thomas by the neck and spun him around. However, when whatever this was spun Thomas around, there was nobody there. Thomas then started to punch the air in front of him, and he said that this air that he was punching did feel like an extremely large coat, and that there was definitely something there, but he couldn't see anything. Thomas's encounter with this ghost was definitely the most notable. However, when the years started to pass and people kept coming forward claiming to have spotted this ghost or had an encounter with this ghost, that is when the residents in the area started to think that maybe this wasn't actually a real ghost at all. And maybe this was a resident of Hammersmith who was dressing up as a ghost and was getting some sick kind of pleasure out of tormenting the other residents that were walking around at night in fear of this ghost. And when people started to come to the realization that maybe this wasn't actually a ghost at all, they were absolutely pissed. People were obviously passing away due to the fear of this ghost, but on top of that, people had become so scared to run into this ghost or to be attacked by this ghost that people started to just avoid areas altogether, like the churchyard for instance. And a lot of people were even too scared of this ghost to leave their house at night. Like, after nightfall would come, people would just go into their house and they wouldn't go out for the rest of the night because they were scared. Not because they didn't have things to do or they didn't want to leave their house, but they were in such a state of fear that they couldn't leave their house. And so obviously because of that, people were very, very, very angry. Because of this, several of the men who lived in Hammersmith got together and they created this sort of watch group, and they would all wait and watch to see if they could catch this ghost. And allegedly, one of the men who was a member of this watch group did come close to catching the ghost. Allegedly, he saw this ghost running through Hammersmith one night and he chased him down and was kind of watching him, and that is when he spotted this person taking off their sheet that they were wearing. So that makes it sound like the Hammersmith ghost was just somebody wearing a sheet, which is crazy that people would look at that and really and truly think that is a ghost. But anyways, that is what this man had claimed to have seen, but obviously there is no proof of that, and that is all just alleged. So now it was January of 1804, and two men in particular were becoming overwhelmingly just done with this entire situation. One of these men was a man by the name of Francis Smith, and he was just at his end's wits. He didn't want to deal with hearing about the ghost anymore. He didn't want people living in fear. And the second man was his neighbor, Thomas Millwood. Now, Thomas's reason for being fed up with this whole ghost thing was very different from Francis's reason. Thomas was a bricklayer, and for his job, he needed to wear a full white suit. And so every single thing that he wore to work was white. And because of this, people would often confuse him for being the Hammersmith Ghost. He had been mistaken for being the Hammersmith Ghost so many times that his wife was actually worried about him going out in public. Like, she was worried that somebody would attack him or something would happen because he kept getting mistaken for being a ghost, that she'd asked him to cover up while he was in public so that he wasn't wearing this strict white uniform. But he was just fed up. He didn't want to do that, and he was standing his ground, so he refused to cover up while he was in public. And his neighbor, again, Francis, was just completely fed up with this. He didn't want anything to do with it. He didn't want to hear about it, but Francis didn't even want justice on whoever was complaining or pretending to be the ghost. He wanted to put an end to this once and for all, and that is what he had planned to do. So on January 3rd, Francis went drinking at a local pub, and afterwards he planned to go ghost hunting. That same night, Thomas had gone out for the night to visit with his mom and his sister wearing his bricklayer uniform. Now, there was another man involved in this, so Francis left the pub that he was at and he ran into a friend by the name of William Girdler. Now, the two of them talked and Francis told William his plan to go ghost hunting that night, and he had told William that he had planned on killing the ghost. If this was a real ghost, could you kill it? Probably not. But William thought that this was interesting, and so he kind of wanted to know what was going on, so he asked Francis to meet up with him after he had, I guess, like, done the deed at the local pub that Francis was at earlier that night. So at that point, they split up. William had to go back to work, and Francis went on his little ghost hunting excursion that he had planned. And I'm sure by now you can see the direction that this case is going in. The paths of Francis and Thomas would cross. At this time, Thomas had just left his parents' house and his sister was standing near the window when she could hear somebody yelling in the streets, "Who are you? Show yourself. I will shoot you." And then before she could even react, she heard a gunshot in the street. Thomas's sister kind of had an idea of what had happened, and she rushed down into the street to find her brother's body laying there in the middle of the street, and nobody was around. Obviously, she was panicking, trying to figure out who had done this and what had happened, but immediately after shooting Thomas, Francis took off. He ran back to that pub that he was at earlier in the day, and that is where he told William, along with two other men, that he had killed the ghost. Like, that doesn't even make sense, buddy. But anyways, after this, Francis, William, and the two other men headed back to the scene of the crime where Francis had allegedly killed this ghost. When they got back to the scene of the crime, that is when they realized that Francis hadn't killed a ghost or somebody pretending to be a ghost. He had actually murdered Thomas Millwood, who was just wearing his work uniform. After realizing this, the four men then took Thomas's body back to the pub that they were at before this had happened, and they summoned a coroner to the pub. The cause of death was determined to be murder, and Francis confessed pretty quickly, and after that he was taken to jail where he would sit and await his trial. Now again, on January 3rd, 1804, that is when Francis would confess to shooting Thomas Millwood. But in his trial on January 13th, 1804, he would say yes, he had shot Thomas Millwood, but it was not murder. Basically said that he had shot Thomas out of fear. He said he was so terrified of seeing the ghost and having an encounter with the ghost that when he saw Thomas Millwood and thought that he was the ghost, he couldn't even react before he had shot because he was just so scared. And so because of that, he didn't think that he should have been charged with murder. Even though Francis hadn't intended on killing Thomas, he did intend on killing somebody that night if you look at this like that. He not only told William, but several other people that he had planned on putting an end to this for good and killing whoever was pretending to be a ghost and tormenting the town. So whether or not he had planned on killing Thomas, he did plan on killing somebody that night, so he was guilty of that. When he was on trial, the jury decided that they wanted to charge him with manslaughter. However, that was not an option, so they did end up coming up with a guilty plea, and Francis was sentenced to be hung the following day. At the time, this case was extremely popular and it was getting a lot of attention, and so because of this, the judge had decided to pass this case on to the crown. And then by January 25th, King George III had changed Francis's sentence from being sentenced to death to serving 1 year of manual labor. And once this had all taken place, nobody had ever seen the Hammersmith Ghost ever again. It just stopped tormenting Hammersmith. Now, obviously, a lot of people believed that the Hammersmith Ghost was just somebody wearing a sheet, running around, tormenting the residents of Hammersmith. The one person that some people speculated could have been the ghost was a man by the name of Graham, and he owned a shoe store, or was the town's shoemaker, and he was said to be quite the prankster. He loved to play pranks on his employees when they were closing up shop at night, and in January of 1804 he was arrested for being a nuisance. It's kind of funny. But some of his employees even said that he had dressed up as a ghost on occasion and had jumped out and scared them. However, he said that he was never the Hammersmith Ghost and that he was just doing this to play a prank on his employees, and that was it. Now, the other theory obviously is that some people do in fact believe that the Hammersmith Ghost was a real life ghost, but this case unfortunately is not one that I think we will ever have answers to. You guys are gonna have to let me know what you think about this case in the comments down below, but that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye guys.